Afternoon, everybody. We're just letting people come in at the moment, so we'll just hold on for a moment or so and then we'll get started. Right, afternoon, everybody. People are still coming in, but I think we'll make a start because we're a couple of minutes past one, and we need to make sure we've got lots of time for discussion later on as well. So, welcome everybody. My name is Stephen Evans. I'm the Chief Executive of the Learning and Work Institute, and thank you for joining us this afternoon to talk about one of our recent reports called No Train, No Gain, which is all about training at work and the benefits of that and where they accrue and how we can widen opportunity. So the way this is going to work in a moment, Aaron Revel, who's our head of lifelong learning, is going to talk us through a bit of the report's findings and set up the discussion. And then we've got an illustrious panel who are going to give some of their reflections and discussions as well. And then we're going to make sure that we've got time, plenty of time for discussion and questions from everybody else later. So please do put your questions and your comments and your ideas into the chat, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. And just to note as well that we are recording the session here as well. So if you're super keen, you can watch it back afterwards and get a second viewing in later on as well. I think that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction, because we'll kind of save most of the time for all of our panelists and for the discussion and questions from everybody later. So let me hand across to Aaron, who's going to take us through the findings of the report. So Aaron, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you to everyone who's joined the call today. It's great to have so many of you on the call and also to have such a star-studded lineup of speakers as well. As Stephen mentioned, I'm Aaron Ravel. I'm the Head of Lifelong Learning here at Learning and Work Institute and was our lead on this report. A huge thank you obviously goes out to the report funder and commissioner Multiverse. Great to have Tim join us today in working with us to pull together I think what is a really valuable piece of work. The report sort of makes a clear case for change, showing the benefits of training to people's pay and life chances, and really speaks to the importance of ensuring, that can happen more often. So I'm going to canter through the findings for the research, sort of tell you briefly about our aims and methodology, what we found, summarize our recommendations, and hopefully hand you back to Stephen in good time so you can hear from the rest of our speakers and have plenty of time for Q&A at the end as well. So if we can go to the next slide. The research sought to explore the impact of training on pay, job mobility, people's ability to change sector, and people's ability to climb the occupational ladder. And to explore that, if we can go to the next slide, um, we mainly relied on data analysis from these sources. If you're wondering about our sort of definition of training in the report, this can relate to any schemes or courses that people might have been on. So this can be government funded, employer funded, or sort of funded by the individual themselves. However, worth mentioning that we restricted the analysis to those who are in full-time jobs, which means that sort of training in this report is most likely to relate to sort of employer-funded in-work training. That's what we did. And what did we find? On to the next slide. So the first key finding, I suppose, is that Access to training is a real boon for people's pay and careers. People who receive and participate in training are paid more, experience more sustained and quicker salary growth, and are also more likely to move into highly skilled roles. On the next slide, um, we found that the sort of training dividend is greatest for those who are on the lower rungs of the occupational ladder, helping them go further faster. And in by extension of sort of those in sort of lower skilled, low paid roles having the most to gain from training, by extension, they also have the most to lose by missing out. And what the report showed really strongly is that the absence of training can have a real anchoring effect for those who are in lower skilled occupations, locking people in what we called a doom loop of low pay, low training, low skills and low pay. And the following chart on the next slide will hopefully help to illustrate that. So what you can see here is some of our analysis taken from Understanding Society data. So that's information about the same individuals who are tracked at regular intervals over a 14-year period. And what you can see here is for those who are in sort of routine and semi-routine occupations, those on the left-hand side there, those that received training were likely to climb two rungs of the occupational ladder, which is sort of twice as far as those who did not. So as I say, yeah, training having a really important role in helping people move into more highly skilled and better paid work. So moving on then, um, our next key finding really was that cuts to training may be impacting pay growth and job moves. And in an environment, as we've just set out, where training is strongly linked with improved pay and career progression, we're seeing that cuts to training may be impacting upon salary growth and job movements within the labour market. So, if we can go to the next slide. Um, We've seen government investment in adult skills be cut by roughly £1 billion since 2010. We've estimated that about 7 million fewer people have gained qualifications as a result of that. And at the same time, we've also seen employers investing less in workplace training. That's come down by nearly a third since 2005, with sort of significant inequalities in who is likely to benefit from training from their employer, and graduates being three times more likely than non-graduates. And what's clear from the report is what's accompanied that period of decline in training is that earnings have flatlined. And that's not only a sort of an endemic feature within the labour market, it's also really clear within people's career journeys, with sort of pay growth for many evaporating by the age of 40. Um, and sort of despite many people reaching a dead end when it comes to pay and career progression, despite sort of other L&W research showing that career changes experience faster pay growth than non-switchers. And indeed, despite sort of 5 decade careers becoming the new norm, what the report shows is that career changing is actually not yet the new norm. And indeed, last year, sort of sector to sector job moves were actually about roughly half the rate than they were at the start of this century. And the next slide shows a graph from um, the longitudinal labour force survey, and you can see there the orange line there signifies sort of moves to a different sector, which you can see has come down quite sharply since the turn of the millennium. So um, uh, in the report, we really argue that that this cannot continue. as a sort of decade of labour market changes lies ahead. So if we just move on to the next slide, and again, please, if we can. So the sort of sum of the labour market changes that will happen over the next decade are likely to result in spurring job demand in some sectors compared to others, but also increasing demand for intermediate and higher level skills and qualifications. And you can see that there from the top two bullet points on the slides, notably workers with low qualifications only accounting for less than 15% of the aggregate job demand by 2035. Most structural change to date has been associated with people retiring from shrinking sectors and new labour market entrants joining growing ones. However, sort of owing to an aging population and longer working lives, this really needs to change with 80% of the 2035 workforce having already left compulsory education. There is a real need for significant upskilling and retraining within our economy. Um, Positively, what this report showed is that there is really strong evidence that access to training is enabling more people to move into growing occupational categories and sectors, and also out of roles and sectors where demand is decreasing. However, with sort of too little training taking place, this is not happening at the the scale or pace required to meet future demand. And there are real risks associated with declining access to workplace training. And as I say, with too many anchored in low-skilled, low-paid jobs where demand is decreasing, there is a real risk for potential job dislocation. Just on to the next slide. What I've done here is just try to show some examples of how training is supporting people to transition into areas where demand for jobs is increasing. So this one, for example, if we look at administrative and support, which is an area where job demand is decreasing, those who received training, only 45% of those remained in this sort of occupation at the end of them being tracked through this data set. But if we can skip to the next slide, what we can see is that for the same group who didn't receive training, that percentage is much higher, standing at 69%, with so far fewer basically moving up the value chain and into jobs where demand is increasing. So as a result of all of these findings, we pulled together some recommendations, which I can run through on the next slide. If we can just go on one more again. So the first is to incentivize employers to give a greater priority to and invest more in workplace training. And one policy idea we put forward around that was tax relief on government investment employer investment in workplace training. The second was to reverse recent cuts that we've seen to um, adult skills budgets. We've calculated at L&W that this could give the economy a £22 billion boost and in time save the taxpayer roughly £8 billion a year. We also call for greater action to enable and empower more people to engage in training that supports with career changing, and that includes through an expanded lifelong learning entitlement with learning accounts for every adult, and that would bring the UK, as we see it, in line with other countries within Europe. So those are the key recommendations coming out of the report. Um, that brings my section of the session to the close. Just to say finally, on the next slide, um, we published this report during Get the Nation Learning week, and our flagship Get the Nation Learning campaign is focused on drawing attention to the value and importance of lifelong learning, as well as catalyzing action by employers and other stakeholders to enable more people to learn throughout life. Um, Multiverse, Ingenuity, and Business London, all of whom you'll hear from on the call today, are proud supporters and signatories to this campaign, and we'd love to welcome as many of you on board as possible. So if you don't have time to scan the QR code on the screen in front of you, please do visit the Get the Nation Learning website after this session to find out more. Yeah, that's all from me for now. I'll hand back to Stephen. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Aaron. An excellent summary and an excellent plug as well there. So I think there's obviously kind of a lot of challenging contexts there around the overall state of the economy being buffeted by shock after shock over the last 15 years, and how this affects employers, the economy as a whole, and individuals too. But we don't just want to be doomsters and gloomsters. So that's why the recommendations and the Get the Nation Learning campaign that Aaron was talking about there at the end too are really about what we do with about all of this. And I think for me, one of the big contributions of this report is to really illustrate and quantify some of the benefits to training at work, to people's careers and moving up the career ladder, and to people's earnings prospects as well. And we hope that that helps to make the argument or shape the argument or underpin the argument for why all of this matters, and we all need to continue to do more together. So in that spirit, what I'm going to do now is ask each of our panelists to come in turn and just give their initial reflections for 5 minutes each, and then we'll have lots of time for questions and answers. So do please pop those in the Q&A box or into the chat as well, and we'll get through as many as possible. So first, I'll ask Tim Smith, who's the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Multiverse, to give his reflections. And Tim, as Aaron said, we're very grateful to Multiverse's support and involvement for this research, and we really couldn't do it without your support. So thank you for that, and interested to hear your reflections.
Thank you so much for hosting this and for being a partner in this as well. Sorry, my video is starting now, so you should be able to see me beaming in from sunny London. We completely, we've worked in lockstep on this report, and we're totally aligned on what it has achieved. I think there's a really good chance that if you're joining a webinar like this, you have a high level of belief in the value of training, probably because you've seen it or experienced yourself. And I think what this report has tried to do, and I think succeeded at, is providing empirical evidence of the fact that lifelong learning and the ability to train in your job has a tangible outcome for both you and for society at large. It shows that, in particular, the workers in the lowest socioeconomic groups who receive training earn about 15% more than those who don't. They get to climb on average 2 rungs of the occupational ladder, which is double the rate of growth for their untrained peers. And it's particularly true for people who are stuck in elementary or early occupations. So there is a real kind of social value and also an economic value to enabling training at large. And at Multiverse, we're one of the UK's largest upskilling platforms, and we're also Europe's only edtech unicorn. We spend 99.9% of our time in the depths of working with people on exactly these kind of stories of people who, perhaps didn't have a great experience of education early in their lives, but have discovered that through an element of real upskilling, they've been able to transition their careers, earn that pay rise or promotion that really makes a kind of meaningful difference to their lives. But we don't get that much time to sit back and really look at the kind of data on a society-wide level, which is why participating in the campaign for lifelong learning and supporting this report and the wider work of the institute is so valuable for us. I should also say it's valuable because my only note of pessimism is that it feels like we are in a kind of societal, political, and kind of economic moment where the case for lifelong learning is at risk of being lost. So a lot of the discussion that happens in Parliament or elsewhere is really couched in the language of trade-offs. Right, it's either supporting young people and the immediate crisis of young people who are at risk of being neat for a very long time to come, or it is enabling lifelong learning and the ability for people to continue progressing up the careers ladder. And again, like the report tracks this very well. Career moves between sectors have halved since the early 2000s. Employer investment in training has fallen, but then so also has government investment in adult skills. And I worry that even in the kind of near term, some of the trade-offs, particularly around one of the largest pots of funding that is out there for spending on lifelong learning, the apprenticeship levy, we're going to see the sort of defunding of some adult apprenticeships and restrictions to levy spend, which further embed this idea of trade-offs and will ultimately deepen the gap between people who can benefit from training and actually receive it. So if that's a note of pessimism, my kind of note of optimism is that this isn't really like a contested ground. It's worth bearing in mind that it was only in 2019 that both Labour's manifesto and the Conservative manifesto had a commitment to a slightly different version of a right to reskill, whether that is kind of paid time off for training, or the Conservatives' version of a kind of right to retrain. I think there is close enough to consensus about the kind of general trajectory that the world is going in, both the importance for the economy, but also at a time when, due to technological change, the labour market is getting more choppy and the shelf life of skills is probably going down rather than up. And so there is that sort of consensus still there. And there are also a whole bunch of really brilliant European examples that we can study, learn from, and seek to implement, should we so choose. So, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, markets where actually Multiverse has some experience of delivering training as well, all have some form of paid training leave backed by dedicated funding mechanisms. The UK currently offers probably the weakest version of this, but that means that we can improve, and the trajectory for us as a nation is really increasing rather than decreasing. We see a lot of great recommendations from this report, but ultimately, we can see there should be, based on evidence bases like the one that has been compiled here, a really exciting vision for what lifelong learning can be. We would think about it as a kind of right to reskill, where any worker who is looking to enhance their economic circumstances, increase productivity in their jobs, and increase their resilience in a kind of changing labour market, has the right to request paid time off leave, the right incentives to ensure their employer feels that is also a good thing for them, and ultimately through the blend of different things that the government is rolling out, whether it's skills boot camps, apprenticeship units, free level 3 courses which still exist, and the lifelong loan entitlement, these things get knitted together into a user-friendly and ambitious plan for a right to reskill for all workers. And the great thing is that because of this report, the evidence base for things like that is really there. So ultimately more excited about the future than pessimistic, and really excited about the fact this has proved so popular with other people who also see the immense benefits that lifelong learning can bring. And with that, I'll pass back to Stephen.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, lots to dig into there, which we'll sort of come along to, particularly around, I think sort of everyone generally agrees lifelong learning and training is a good thing, but no one wants to pay for it. And particularly in a world of very low growth, and therefore more of one thing equals less of another. And that's why I do think that kind of long-term perspective about how we kickstart growth and about demographic change, meaning we need to upskill and retrain more often. And we've argued similarly for that sort of right to retrain or upskill as well becomes even more important. So we'll kind of get onto all of this, but I'm going to bring in our next panelist now, Anne Watson, who's the CEO of Ingenuity. And I know you kind of work with lots of employers. Sorry, you just moved on my screen now. I lost you there for a moment. Lots of different employers and thinking about the challenges they face, but also the opportunities ahead. So I'm really interested in your perspective.
Brilliant, thank you, Stephen. And good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be with you. And I'm going to focus in my kind of 5-7 minutes in terms of the employer view, because they're a really important partner in terms of learning and development and training, and particularly SMEs. But first, I want to give you a quick introduction for those of you that don't know Engenuity. So we are a charitable group. We work across the advanced manufacturing and engineering sector, and our DNA is all about making sure employers get access to the talent and skills that they need, and obviously upskilling and reskilling, apprenticeships, all kind of training and learning development is really important, and really important part of that. Our particular focus is around small and medium enterprises in the sector. Why is that the case? Well, 90% of the businesses within manufacturing are SME, so they're a really important part of this whole picture. And from an Engenuity perspective, we've been around since the 1960s, so we've got a lot of history in terms of skills. We were one of the original industry training boards under the first statutory levy. And as a charitable group, we invest around £2 million a year into the sector, again, to encourage that kind of skills development and talent. Next slide, please. So via the Engenuity Policy Centre for Supply Chain and SMEs, we've recently concluded our second SME snapshot survey. We call it a snapshot survey because that's exactly what it is. It takes 6 minutes of an SME's time, but it gives us some really valuable results, and we do it twice a year. It's hot off the press because actually the official publication is not for another couple of weeks. I'm going to kind of give you a bit of a preview of some of the survey findings that are particularly relevant to, I think, this conversation. Next slide, thank you. So we know when it comes to training staff that from an employer perspective, and I'm an employer and Stephen's an employer, actually affordability is a big part of that consideration. And when we look at the current picture for our SMEs in manufacturing, we continue to see that employment costs, labour costs, are still the biggest challenge for them when it comes to their cost base. So although energy and utility costs are increasing, actually it remains kind of pretty constant that over 80% of SMEs are still saying that employment costs are the biggest pressures on their business. And this is due to the changes that we've seen. So the increases in national insurance contribution, national minimum wage, national apprenticeship wage, all putting those kind of financial pressures on a small business. And I guess to put this into context, one SME business told us last year that they had a turnover of £4 million. Their profit was reduced from £120,000 to just £40,000 because of the national insurance contribution increases. So when you see the kind of the impact on the bottom line of a kind of a policy change can make, well, actually that business now has got less wiggle room financially to invest in its people than it had previously. And of course, they're looking at different measures to offset the rising costs. So I guess it's optimistic and great to see that 70% of them are now planning to improve productivity, and that has been an increase. But much of that productivity improvement could very well come from increased capital investment. Next slide, please. And when we look at that, I guess, investment from manufacturing SMEs, some of the biggest investment is obviously in capital, but also we're looking from this discussion in terms of the investment in human capital and people. So what the SMEs told us in terms of what they've actually done over the last 12 months, so between January 26 and January 25, is that they've increased quite significantly their investment in capital and equipment. And we can see that. So 32% of the SMEs have said it's increased, whilst only 24% said that actually over the last 12 months they'd actually increased that investment in training. So I think some of that investment in capital is very much being stimulated by productivity improvements to offset some of these increasing costs rather than actually passing the cost on to their customers. Next slide, please. So that was kind of the historic view. If we're looking forward in terms of what our SMEs telling us that they plan to do over the next 12 months, well, then I guess the increase in capital investment is continuing to increase. But actually, when we look at the investment in training and what they're planning to do in terms of their own staff, that's relatively kind of staying constant. So we've got about half of SMEs saying that their investment in staff training is going to stay the same. Those looking to increase has fallen slightly. So it's still that picture in terms of capital investment versus human investment. We're seeing a very, very different picture. Next slide, please. So you're probably thinking, why is she talking capital investment versus human investment? Well, I think it's a really important point, because actually when we look at capital investment and investing in our people and our employees, both actually make a really big contribution to economic growth. But the UK fiscal system actually doesn't treat the two in the same way when it comes to incentives to invest. So we've got things like the research and development tax credit, which incentivizes employers to invest in productivity improvements and invest in their capital. But where's the learning and development equivalent? And we saw when Aaron spoke, actually, the reference to incentives for employers came out of the work that the Learning and Work Institute have just concluded. And we really need to think to look at that kind of incentivization, particularly when training spend per employee is contracted by 26% in real terms since 2005. And for those 71% of SMEs who plan to offset the costs with increase in productivity, then actually to be able to do that, as we always say, technology on its own is pretty useless. What they're going to need to be able to do is to upskill and reskill their existing workforce. And Ingenuity has been told by SMEs that the one thing that would really get them kind of being able to invest more in their workforce is that if there was some kind of skills tax credit available. And when we think about SMEs making up 90% of manufacturing businesses, we really need to find a fiscal lever that works for them so that we can help them to be able to increase training spend, because they're absolutely fundamental to the supply chain and they're absolutely fundamental to the large manufacturing businesses. Next slide, please. So it's, I think, really positive that actually Ingenuity, working with the Learning and Work Institute, are really ahead of the curve on this. So we've been working together for a number of months to look to build the case for a skills tax credit. And I think the business case that not only stacks up for SMEs and will encourage them, and we know that they will use it and it will work for them, but really important, a business case that will stack up for the Treasury and demonstrate to government that actually some form of learning and development tax credit will actually provide an economic boost to the economy. So as part of the work with Stephen and his team, we're seeking to understand kind of the barriers to investment. So what is stopping SMEs from actually investing in their workforce? Are there other factors at play than just things like employment costs? But we're also looking at international learnings and to see what other countries do. And it was interesting to kind of hear what Tim was saying about how other countries kind of the lens that they view this through. So I think just to finish and in summary, our SMEs do want to invest in their people. They understand that they're absolutely critical to the future of their own success, their own organisation, but also to the economy. But I think sometimes some of the fiscal levers that government pull and use, such as national insurance contributions, improvements in national minimum wage, although very, very positive, and we can all kind of understand and commend some of them, actually they can have unintended consequences in negatively impacting the affordability, particularly for our SMEs. So I think that's really important, why we do need to look at what other fiscal levers that can be used and can be pulled, particularly a skills tax credit. So I'm going to stop there, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Yes, and I think a sort of important point about the wider business context and things like capital investment and all the increasing burdens on employers as a context for training and linked to as well. So again, lots of issues we're going to come back to. And I can see there are a number of questions, really good questions coming up in the chat as well. So do please keep those coming through and we'll get to as many as we can. But in the meantime, I'll move on to bring in our next speaker. So Cheryl Giles, who's a Senior Employer and Partnership Manager at the Department for Work and Pensions. And so very, very interested to get your views on the report and the debate so far.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much for inviting me along today. So why is it important for your businesses that you actually upskill? So like Stephen said, I'm from the Department of Work and Pensions, and investing in upskilling your workforce can strengthen your business, boost productivity and support long-term growth. The labour market is changing rapidly, and employers who invest in skills now place themselves ahead of the curve. The labour market is changing, and in my years in this role, I have seen that happening with different roles. Like I said, with AI coming in, etc., the roles that my team do constantly changing. So rapid pace of technology change, we shift towards digital and hybrid roles, and skill shortages across multiple sectors, which is a growing concern. Roles are evolving faster than ever. Digital tools, AI, automation, and new customer expectations are reshaping job requirements. Many sectors face ongoing skill shortages, meaning employers are competing for talent. Upskilling your existing staff to progress within your business will ensure retention and loyalty. It's one of the most effective ways to close these gaps internally. The benefits for the employers in investing in your employees: increased productivity and effectiveness, better staff retention, which we are seeing a big increase where retention employers are struggling to retain their staff, better engagement, reduced recruitment costs, as we know that it's a high impact to all employers, greater ability to adapt to change within your workforce because they actually know your business. Upskilling improves performance. Employees who feel confident and capable deliver better results. It also increases retention. Like I said, staff who feel invested in and are more likely to stay, reducing churn and recruitment costs to employers. Skilled teams also help your business stay resilient when markets or technologies shift. Government evidence shows that progressing to qualifications above an individual's current level will higher their future earnings, as the report stated. The benefit for the employees: individuals feel more confident, job satisfaction, they want to stay within your business, clear career pathways, so you've got that loyalty, ability to take on more responsibility and increase earning potentials for your business and the individual. Employees benefit too. Upskilling builds confidence, opens progression routes, and helps individuals see a future within your organization. This leads to a more motivated workforce, increasingly start their careers in low pay. So they start at entry-level jobs. Many employers I work with, we help to backfill entry-level jobs where they're progressing their current employees up that career ladder within your business. So to summarize, skills investment equals business growth, stronger workforce, stronger productivity, long-term sustainability and competitiveness. So how can DWP help support and backfill those entry-level jobs? DWP, we offer a recruitment service that at no cost to the employer. So it's all been paid for by the taxpayers previously. We can actually backfill those entry-level jobs as you progress your employees up the career ladder within your organisation. Thank you, Stephen.
Great, thank you for that. I guess the sort of one of the things I'm sure we'll get onto more in the discussion is if trading is so amazing for everybody and has all these win-win benefits, why are fewer people and employers doing it, and how do we change that? So that kind of feels like quite an important question that we'll come on to. But I will bring in Victoria next as our last but not least speaker. So Victoria Armstrong, who's policy manager with Business London. So Victoria, what's your perspective?
Hi, thanks, Stephen. So just for those who aren't aware, Business London, we're a membership organisation who represent around 175 businesses across London, across various sectors, from property developers to professional services, education, and many more. So we're quite well placed to sort of speak on what our members and employers are saying as part of this sort of skills piece. We also are the lead employer representative body on the London LSIP. So we're at the moment finishing off that 2026 version of the London Local Skills Improvement Plan. So we're really seeing an up-to-date picture of what employers are demanding across London. So the findings of the No Train, No Gain report really strongly resonate with what we're being told by our members. Businesses are recognising that skills and training are central to productivity, innovation, growth, but at the same time, a lot of firms feel that the current system makes it really difficult to invest in people and widen access to training. One of the biggest challenges we're hearing about is the cost and complexity of training, particularly in the sort of environment we find ourselves in at the moment, where businesses are facing really tight margins, rising operating costs, and a lot of economic uncertainty. So training budgets often are becoming one of the first things that are cut back on. Many employers, especially SMEs, find that investing in training can feel like a lot of upfront cost without guaranteed return on that. With that, there's also a lot of structural challenges on how the skills system operates. Programs like apprenticeships have huge potential, but employers are telling us that the system's too rigid, too difficult to navigate. And what they really want to see is flexible and responsive training that aligns to the skills needs that they're seeing, specifically in areas like digital and green technologies, advanced technical roles. Cheryl touched a bit there on the advancement of AI recently and the impact that's having on the job market and skills itself as well. So if we're looking ahead, meeting the upskilling and retraining challenges has a lot of shared responsibility. Employers clearly have a central role. Businesses are best placed to understand the skills that their workforce needs today and in the future. But many are investing heavily in training, mentoring, workforce development where they can. Forward-looking firms are trying to embed learning into career pathways, expanding apprenticeships, and using new models like modular training and digital training to keep skills development throughout careers. Government also does have a role in this to play as well. There's a lot of frameworks and incentives that are currently being rolled out to ensure that skills become more flexible and easier to access and aligns with labour market needs. And that support for lifelong learning so that workers can retrain and adapt throughout their careers is really important and valuable. We now exist in a labour market where people are working for 40 or 50 years, and we need to move away from the idea that education is only at the beginning of your life. It's something that needs to be continuous and accessible throughout your career. Individuals also have a role to play in this. We need people to recognise opportunities and sort of invest in that themselves. That is a very small part of it, though. We do need better signposting. We need employers to be engaging where they can, and we need that support available for employers to engage and support as well. So what we've seen is AI is a really big demand across sectors. People don't expect people needing to be able to code it, but we do need people who are able to sort of have that basic AI literacy, and that's what employers are really focusing on at the minute as well, from what we're hearing from them. We're seeing a lot of businesses that are focusing on reskilling staff rather than relying solely on recruitment, retaining and retraining experienced employees is often more effective than trying to hire new skills. At the same time, it's about maintaining that talent pipeline to make sure that once your workforce is beginning to retire or change careers, you still have a reliable talent pipeline. We're also seeing employers place a lot of emphasis on transferable and intermediate skills. Things like digital literacy, data skills, project management are things that can be applied across sectors. And we're also seeing employers have a lot more interest in partnerships. And this is really where we see a lot of opportunity with skills in London, is that businesses and training providers and universities and further education colleges working together to develop pipelines of talent to ensure that real industry needs are being met through this. But my closing statement, I'm trying to not cut too much into our Q&A time, is that we really need to all work together to build a skills system that's agile, collaborative, and future focused. There's responsibility on the individual, on employers, on government to make sure that this is available. And again, that message of education isn't just for the start of your life. It's something that is really valuable to continue up through your career path and continue progressing with.
Great, thank you, Victoria. We've got questions coming through in the chat, so do keep them coming. I'm going to come to those in a second, but I'm going to take Chair's prerogative to, I guess, sort of bounce off the back of something you said, Victoria, and you might want to come back on this, as might Anne and Tim, or anyone who wants to come back in. So you talked about the employer responsibilities, and also about employers not always feeling they get what they want from the publicly funded system. And of course, where publicly funded training is focused on employers, it should meet employer needs because that's the point. But it's not the state's responsibility to pay for everything that private employers need to make a profit. So if the publicly funded system isn't meeting employers' needs, they can go and pay for training elsewhere outside the system. And I know lots of that happens, but actually less of it happens than it did. So my question is, training isn't just, often these debates get sort of a bit reductive into sort of how can we make the publicly funded system better? And we do need to do that. But also we need employers to invest more themselves. And that's a difficult task in a tough economy and all the factors Anne went through. But I'm interested, perhaps Victoria and then maybe Anne and anyone else who wants to come in, how can we better get employers investing directly themselves, not just engaging in the publicly funded system, but engaging more and investing more in skills themselves?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is to sort of evidence to employers that although it may not be you're investing now and you're getting an immediate return on that investment in this moment, it's about demonstrating the sort of extended value of investing in your people and investing in skills training. Incidentally, earlier this morning, I was up at Stansted Airport looking up at their college that they've established on site, where they're training people to work across all manner of areas in Stansted. They're training flight attendants, and they're training ground crew, and they're training people who work in the retail stores in the airport. And they are really emphasizing that, it's an investment, and they don't want to pigeonhole people by training them. They want to open up as many opportunities as possible. And they start that they've got sort of two sectors on that. They've got training for under 18s through a college, and then they also work with Job Centre to get needs back into training on short 2-week courses. And they see a lot of value both in the community through doing that, but then it also comes back round, and people find themselves really well engaged with themselves. So that's sort of an example of the return on investment, so to speak, on that.
Great, thanks, Victoria. And Louise has made a comment in the chat as well about actually it's not just the cost of the trading, it's the releasing the staff, and then you've got to cover the work, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff there. I don't know if anyone else wants to come in on that particular issue, or shall I?
Can I
Yeah,
just come in,
Cheryl. Yeah.
Stephen? Thank you. Nice to hear, Victoria, that they're actually doing, we call it a sector-based work academy that they're actually doing up there. And this is where we look at what skills an employer needs in the job centre. The employer tells us what you need in the way of skills, entry-level skills, whether it's health and safety, etc., CSCS cards, whatever, etc. And then we work with the provider and the employer and actually design a bespoke course to actually get those people in to your employment, into your businesses. So the other thing that I do is a lot of partnership work. And I've also led on the health agenda. So I work very closely with the education people and also the colleges. And I know that it's worthwhile businesses actually reaching out to the education people, and because they would do upskilling sessions. Some of them are free, there are some you have to pay for, but also the college actually offers upskilling sessions to actually, bring your staff, invest in them, and actually give them something to fit so they feel valued. I do understand the cost implications because I did have my own business previously of actually releasing staff, but sometimes you have to bite the bullet and you don't see the results there and then, like you said, but you have to bite that bullet to see the investment in the future for it to actually come into fruition.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the difficulty of thinking long term when actually, you don't know what's going to happen this week is kind of a bit of a tricky balance. There is a question in here about the maybe for Aaron about the report, which is one is about the sort of have we distinguished between types of training in here, which I'm not sure we have in this data set, but I've plugged our report coming out on Friday. And there's another point here about we've looked at earnings growth here, but Eleanor has asked about the sort of people becoming business leaders or kind of wider benefits of learning or things like that. So Aaron, I didn't know if you wanted to come in specifically on those 2 points.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, on the point around the training variable, I mean, we use this most within in our analysis of understanding society data. So within that basically tracks an individual regular intervals over like a 14-year period. The waves run between 2009 and 2023. And the individuals are sort of, have they engaged with any training schemes or courses? So that could be government funded, that could be um, funded by themselves, or that could be employer funded. But as part of the analysis, we limited that to those who were in full-time jobs, which means that the training within the report, I suppose, is most likely to be employer funded in work training. But it could encompass training that those people are engaging with outside of work as well. So yeah, that's that point around definition.
Great, thank you. Now I'm conscious that we've got about 6, by my clock anyway, 6 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of come round each of the panelists as you appear on my screen and just ask you for sort of particular, you might want to pick up a question that's in the chat. So there's particularly one around, so we talked about employers and we talked about the state, but what about the role of trades unions, for example, in sectors that are more unionised? So things, the Union Learning Fund, for example, used to be an excellent thing within England, in my opinion. And there's a question also from Ben about the rationale for when is something the state's responsibility versus the employers and the individuals. I have an answer to that, but I should probably let the panelists answer it. So kind of either pick up one of those topics, or if you want to give a sort of final thought, we're going to try and finish on the sunlit uplands of what we can do with this to sort of make a change and make tomorrow better than today. That's a nice, easy question, isn't it? So, Cheryl, you're first on my screen, so can I go to you first, please?
Okay, so from my side of things, so the Department for Education, the skills budget has just come across to DWP. Currently, we don't know what that looks like for us. We do invest in skills on people that's unemployed, that's claiming universal credit. But what my thing for you then is, if you have people that's claiming universal credit and they are not in full time with you and they need upskilling, get them to speak to their work coach within the job centre, because that's something we can invest in and actually help them, which helps your business. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thank you. And Anne, you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think picking up kind of Ben's point around kind of international comparators, and I mean, we've done work in I think in the Middle East and with different countries, kind of helping them in terms of their skills development. And I think one of the things that always strikes me in comparison to the UK is other countries have a kind of workforce development plan. So they have a long-term strategic plan in terms of where the country's going, where the country wants to go, and the skills that it needs. And that way it can put the right infrastructure in place. And I think it gets the right then kind of public-private partnership investment in training right. I think one of the, I think one of the things I think we have in the UK is that our skills strategies often don't survive beyond different parties, different governments. They often don't survive beyond different skills ministers. And therefore, you don't get that stability and that continuity that's going to kind of encourage employers to make that investment. So if we look at the current, the world currently, where there's so many different policy changes, V levels, T levels, apprenticeship units, that's been mentioned in the chat, apprenticeship assessment reforms, all of that is a real big distraction to employers and actually making them hesitate in terms of investing in their people.
Great, thank you, Anne. And Victoria?
So sort of my sort of closing thoughts are businesses do want to invest in people. They know it drives growth and opportunity. Unlocking the full benefits of training does require a coordinated action across employers, government, and individuals. As your reports demonstrated, if we get this right, the size of the prize is significant. We get a more productive economy, stronger businesses, and better opportunities for people to progress through their careers. So I think that's something that we really need to prioritise.
Thank you, Victoria. And Aaron, as the lead on the report, is there anything you would like to add?
Just to say that I suppose, and through my work on the Get the Nation Learning campaign, I suppose just we launched that campaign in May of last year, and we've got nearly 200 organisations who have signed up, and all of those organisations sort of committing to both publicly recognise the importance of lifelong learning in all its forms, but critically also do something about that fact. And the fact that we've been able to sort of scale that movement at such pace shows that actually within the country as a whole, we do have employers, local and regional government organisations, community organisations, learning providers, doing the hard yards day by day to increase and extend access to workplace training and lifelong learning of other forms. So yeah, it's always heartening for me, as part of this wider picture to see the efforts that are being taken. And I think, we've got an important role to play in celebrating, I suppose, what good looks like, and empowering and informing others on the steps that they could be taking. And so what small wins they could be making, I guess.
Great, thanks, Aaron. And Tim, last word for you.
Okay, in 15 seconds, I think just to tie it all together, I think, and this speaks to some of the questions in the chat about apprenticeship units and the right in-work placements. I think ultimately the system has many great aspects to it, but they are undermined somewhat by the level of complexity. And Anne, you referenced this with employers who are struggling with the kind of pace of change and initiatives that don't see out the kind of much of a shelf life. There are loads of reasons to be optimistic about the power of lifelong learning and the different routes that are available to make it happen. But I think with a bit of consistency, a bit of navigation to help employers work out what is right for them, then ultimately this can become a system that is more than the sum of its parts, rather than an assembled jigsaw of different parts. So we feel optimistic about that, and are very pleased that so many people share that as well. So thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Tim. And thank you to all of our panel, everybody who's dialed in this afternoon, all of the questions. We tried to get through as many of those as possible. Sorry if we didn't quite get to yours. And thank you to the L&W team, both for putting together the report and putting today's webinar on as well. This is an important topic, and today is definitely not the end of any of that. So we hope that the report is interesting and useful, and that we can all work together to try and expand access to training and to lifelong learning, and including through the Get the Nation Learning campaign that Aaron was mentioning before. So please do pick up with us directly if you're keen to work on any of these issues further, because we'd love to work with you. But meantime, a big thank you to Multiverse once again for their support for this report. It's very gratefully received, and has allowed us to do this report and have this discussion, which hopefully has been useful and interesting to you all. So thank you everybody for your time today, and have a good rest of the day and rest of the week ahead. Thank you everybody.